The morning rush at JFK Airport was chaos, families fumbling with passports, business travelers juggling laptops, TSA officers calling out instructions. In the middle of it all, a tall, muscular man in uniform, his Navy SEAL insignia catching the light, suddenly staggered. His face went pale, and before anyone could react, he collapsed hard onto the cold tiles of the security checkpoint. Gasps filled the air. Some passengers froze. Others pulled out phones, while most stood in shock. One woman, a traveler in a simple jacket and jeans, didn't hesitate. She dropped her bag, pushed through the crowd, and knelt beside him with calm, deliberate movements. The TSA agents were still scrambling to radio for medical staff, but she was already checking his pulse, tilting his head back, and giving crisp, practiced instructions to the onlookers. No one knew who she was, but the way she moved was unmistakable. This wasn't her first crisis. Within seconds, the ordinary-looking traveler revealed skills that went far beyond what anyone expected. The airport had just become her battlefield, and every second mattered. The hum of the airport was like a living thing. Loudspeaker announcements echoed above the sea of voices, the shuffle of luggage wheels, and the clink of trays at security. It was just another busy morning rush at JFK, with hundreds of travelers crammed into winding lines at the TSA checkpoint. Mothers tried to keep track of passports and restless children, while business travelers tapped nervously on phones. Already late for flights, at the front of the line stood a man who commanded attention without trying. His broad shoulders filled out the crisp Navy uniform he wore. The insignia on his chest gleamed under the fluorescent lights, one that only the most elite ever earned. His jawline was sharp, his bearing rigid, the kind of figure that made others instinctively step aside. Some passengers glanced at him with quiet respect, whispering about what he might have seen, where he might have served. But then, the SEAL's hand twitched as he fumbled with his carry-on. His brow furrowed. He blinked hard, as though fighting a wave of dizziness. A security officer noticed and asked if he was all right, but the man gave no answer. His knees buckled, and within seconds, the towering figure crumpled to the floor. The sound of his collapse, a body hitting. Cold tile cut through the noise of the airport like a gunshot. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. A child began to cry. Someone shouted, "Call 911." TSA agents rushed toward him, fumbling with their radios, their hands shaking more than they wanted to admit. Passengers either froze in place or did what so many do in moments of crisis, pulled out their phones, recording the scene while most stood paralyzed. One woman was already moving. She was dressed plainly, jeans, a gray jacket, a travel bag slung across her shoulder. Nothing about her screamed authority or training. Yet the way she broke from the line and dropped to her knees beside the fallen SEAL was unmistakable. She knew exactly what she was doing. "Clear some space," she commanded, her voice steady, not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the confusion. People shuffled back, startled by the authority in her tone. She pressed 2 fingers to the man's neck. No pulse. Without hesitation, she tilted his head back, checked his airway, and began chest compressions, rhythmic, precise, powerful. The heel of her palms struck down with practiced force, 30 compressions followed by 2 measured breaths. Not a movement wasted, not a second of doubt. "TSA, get me an AED." She barked without even looking up. Her tone was not a plea but an order, as though she had every right to command. The officer nearest her scrambled, redoing frantically for the defibrillator. The passengers who had been recording lowered their phones. Something about her movements, crisp, exact, unshaken, shifted the atmosphere. The fear was still there, but it mingled now with awe. Who was she? How could she stay so calm while a Navy SEAL, of all people, lay lifeless at her side? Seconds dragged on, each one heavier than the last. The man's chest did not rise on its own. The airport noise seemed to fade, placed by the harsh sound of her compressions and the silent prayer hanging over the crowd. In that moment, the busy airport terminal was no longer just a place of travel. It had become a battlefield, and the woman kneeling in jeans and a jacket was its only soldier. The air around the security checkpoint grew tense, every second feeling like a countdown. The SEAL's body remained motionless, his chest rising only when the woman breathed for him. "Where's the AED?" She snapped, her voice cutting sharper now, her hands never slowing as she delivered another round of compressions. Sweat already glistened across her forehead, but her expression was calm, almost frighteningly calm. A TSA agent came rushing forward with the defibrillator, fumbling to open the case. He stammered, I don't know how to give it here." She ordered. She didn't wait for hesitation. Snatching the machine from his hands, she tore it open, peeled the adhesive pads free, and pressed them firmly against the SEAL's chest. The automated voice of the machine blared, analyzing heart rhythm. "Do not touch the patient." The crowd held its breath. The woman sat back just enough, eyes locked on the man she was determined to bring back. Shock advised. Charging. Clear. She barked louder this time, her eyes sweeping across the onlookers. TSA agents, passengers, even the children obeyed instantly, stepping back. The authority in her voice left no room for questions. The machine delivered its jolt. The SEAL's body jerked violently, his head rolling to the side. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. For a second, nothing happened. Then his chest shuddered, but still no breath came. Her jaw tightened. Starting compressions again? Without hesitation, she leaned in, resuming CPR with relentless precision. Each push of her palms was steady and controlled, her body weight driving into her arms. She counted under her breath, a soldier's cadence, her rhythm perfect. A man in the crowd whispered, "Is she a doctor?" Another shook his head, "No. That's military training. Look at how she moves. That's combat medic stuff." Whispers spread quickly. To the onlookers, this plain-dressed traveler was no longer a random Good Samaritan. She was something more, something trained. The AED's voice spoke again, analyzing heart rhythm. "Do not touch the patient." She pulled back, sweat dripping now, her breathing controlled. Her gaze never leaving the SEAL's face. Shock advised. Charging. Clear. She shouted again, her hand raised like a commander giving orders on the field. The second jolt coursed through his chest. His body arched, then fell limp again. The silence in that heartbeat was deafening. Then a gasp, barely audible at first. Then stronger, his lungs dragged in air on their own. The woman's eyes flickered with relief, but she didn't stop. She quickly tilted his head back, checking his breathing. His chest rose unevenly, shallow but steady. "He's back," she said. Her voice softer now, but still firm. The TSA agents stared in shock. Some passengers had tears in their eyes. No one reached for their phones anymore. They weren't watching for entertainment, they were watching survival. A fight against death itself, as she stabilized his airway and adjusted the recovery position. The woman didn't smile, didn't sigh in relief. She worked with mechanical focus, as though she'd done this hundreds of times before and she had. Finally, she looked up, her voice calm but commanding. "He needs medics now. Don't just stand there. Guide them through security when they arrive." "We don't have time for paperwork." The TSA officer who had been fumbling before immediately straightened, nodding like a soldier receiving an order in the crowd. One man muttered, "She's not just some traveler. She's trained. Special forces trained." And as the murmurs grew, the image of an ordinary woman faded away. In her place stood something else entirely, someone who had seen crisis before and knew exactly how to win against it. The SEAL's shallow breaths rattled in his chest, uneven and fragile like a flame about to go out. The crowd leaned forward, watching every flicker of his body for proof he was still alive. Some people covered their mouths, others whispered prayers under their breath. The woman didn't flinch. Her eyes locked onto the rise and fall of his chest, her mind calculating. She knew it wasn't enough. His pulse was still faint, his breaths irregular. This wasn't over. "Stay with me," she muttered under her breath, her hands moving with deliberate speed. She checked his airway again, adjusted his head, and leaned closer to listen. His breathing faltered, then stopped. "Not good," she hissed, and without hesitation, she went back to compressions. Her palms pressed into his sternum, each push strong and exact. the sound of her hands thudding against his chest, echoing louder than the airport announcements overhead. She counted out loud this time, sharp, steady. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her voice carried across the checkpoint, steady as a metronome, keeping rhythm not just for herself, but for the hope of everyone watching. Passengers, who had been paralyzed moments before, now hung on her every word. One young man, still gripping his suitcase, began counting with her under his breath. A mother with her children closed her eyes and whispered the numbers too, almost as if joining her effort from afar. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. Back to compressions. Her movements were mechanical, efficient, without panic, but the sweat dripping from her temples betrayed the strain. The AED spoke again, analyzing heart rhythm. Do not touch the patient. She pulled her hands back quickly, her eyes narrowing as though daring the machine to give her the right answer. Shock advised. Charging. Clear. She barked, raising her hand. This time the crowd shouted with her. The third jolt rippled through his body, stronger than the last. His chest arched, his fists twitched, and then he slumped again. The silence afterward was unbearable. She leaned down, ear against his mouth. Nothing. His airway was open, but his body wasn't taking it in. Her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing with the same fire soldiers carried into combat. Fine, she muttered. We do this the hard way. She began compressions again, harder now, her arms locked, her body rocking with each push. She felt ribs give beneath her palms, normal in resuscitation, but still a grim reminder of how close to the edge she was. She didn't stop. Come on, she whispered between pushes. I've seen men fight through worse than this. Don't you dare quit here. Her words weren't loud, but they carried. People in the crowd leaned forward, hearing her speak to him like a comrade on the battlefield, not a stranger on an airport floor. A TSA officer crouched near her, voice trembling. Ma'am, the paramedics are 2 minutes out. She didn't look up. 2 minutes is too long. He doesn't have 2 minutes. Her focus never wavered. Her compressions stayed steady. Her breaths were measured. Her commands sharp. At one point, she pointed to a man in the crowd without breaking rhythm. You get water. Towels. Now the man, startled, dropped his bag and sprinted. Then, finally, a miracle. As she delivered another breath, the SEAL's chest rose with hers. For a second, it fell flat again, but then his body jerked, a deep rattling inhale filling his lungs. His pulse, faint before, thudded stronger beneath her fingers. The crowd erupted in gasps. A few clapped, some cried, others whispered, "Thank God," but she didn't celebrate. Not yet. She kept her eyes on him, tracking every fragile breath, every twitch of his chest. She adjusted his position, rolled him gently onto his side to keep his airway clear, and monitored his pulse. His eyelids fluttered. Slowly, heavily, he blinked up at the blurry figures above him. His lips moved, no words forming, but a faint sound emerged. You're okay, she said firmly, her voice low but commanding. Don't move. Just breathe. The medics arrived seconds later, pushing through the crowd with their gear. They expected chaos, but instead they found order. The woman had already stabilized him, set him in recovery, and briefed him with the precision of one of their own. Male, mid-30s. Sudden collapse. No pulse on arrival. CPR started immediately. 3 shocks delivered. Pulse returned 30 seconds ago. He's breathing but shallow. Airways clear. He needs oxygen and transport, stat. The lead medic stared at her for a split second, surprised at her flawless report. Then he nodded. Got it. As they worked, attaching monitors and oxygen, one medic glanced at her again. Something about the way she moved, the way she spoke, was familiar. Recognition flickered in his eyes. You're not just some bystander, are you? He muttered. She didn't answer. She simply stood, wiped her forehead with the back of her sleeve, and adjusted the strap of her bag. Her breathing was steady, but her eyes carried a weight that silenced further questions. The SEAL, drifting in and out of consciousness, managed to open his eyes again. For a second, they locked onto hers. Weak as he was, He rasped one word. You. His lips trembled. Saved me. She gave a small nod, nothing more. No smile, no acknowledgement. Just a quiet acceptance, like saving a life was routine. The medics secured him onto the stretcher, wheeling him toward the exit. The crowd parted, still silent, their gazes following the strange woman who had turned an airport terminal into a battlefield. And won. But when they looked for her again, she was already walking away, slipping back into the stream of passengers, and whispers filled the air. Who was she? She moved like military. No special forces. Did you see how she commanded everyone? She wasn't ordinary. She couldn't be, they were right. She wasn't. But she left no answers behind. Only the proof of her actions, and a Navy SEAL whose life had been snatched back from death because one stranger refused to stand by. The paramedics wheeled the Navy SEAL out on a stretcher. Oxygen mask pressed against his face, monitors beeping with renewed life. Relief rippled through the checkpoint, but the tension had not fully broken. The passengers still lingered, not ready to leave. Their eyes fixed on the woman who had just pulled a man back from death as if it were second nature. She stood silently at the edge of the crowd. Her hands now still, her breathing calm again. The gray jacket she wore clung to her shoulders, damp with sweat. Her travel bag hung loosely at her side, but there was nothing ordinary about her posture. She didn't fidget, didn't tremble. She carried herself with the unshakable presence of someone who had walked through fire before and lived to tell the tale, but she never told. The whispers grew louder. She knew exactly what to do. No hesitation. Not even a doctor moves like that too. Tactical. She ordered TSA around. Like she outranked them, a man in a suit, still holding his shoes from the checkpoint, muttered, I've seen medics in Afghanistan. She moved just like them. The TSA officer who had brought the AED approached her cautiously. His face was pale, his hands still trembling from adrenaline. Ma'am, I just want to say, thank you. If it weren't for you, focus on tightening your response protocols, she said evenly, cutting him off, though not unkindly. Her tone was practical, almost clinical. You lost 30 seconds fumbling. Next time, those seconds could be the difference. He swallowed hard and nodded, ashamed but grateful for the correction. The lead paramedic jogged back toward her after stabilizing the SEAL in the ambulance bay. His gear rattled as he slowed, eyes narrowing with recognition. Wait a second. His voice lowered. I know you. Or at least, I've heard about you. The woman turned her gaze on him, sharp, controlled like a scalpel. You're mistaken, but he shook his head. No, I remember. Back in Kandahar. We heard stories about a combat mediquan who never lost a patient in the field, no matter how bad it got. They said she carried men out herself when helicopters couldn't land, that she kept fighting after she got hit. He tilted his head. That was you, wasn't it? The crowd leaned closer, the tension thickening. Passengers hungry for confirmation, TSA curious, travelers hanging on every word. The woman didn't answer immediately. She simply adjusted the strap of her bag, as if preparing to walk away. But before she could, the medic spoke again, his tone reverent this time. You don't have to hide it. I know who you are. You're Captain Maya Lewis, former Special Operations Combat Medic Task Force Black? The murmurs exploded. Special Operations? Task Force Black. That's classified stuff. Wait, so she was military? Maya's eyes flickered for the first time just for a second. A ghost of something unspoken passed across her face. Pain, memory, regret. She drew in a slow breath, then shook her head. I'm nobody, she said softly. But the firmness in her tone dared anyone to argue. The medic didn't push further, but his eyes said everything he knew, and so did everyone else. She had given herself away, not in words, but in action, as she turned to leave. A voice stopped her, hoarse, weak, but carrying weight. Ma'am. The Navy SEAL, propped halfway up on the stretcher as the paramedics adjusted his fore, was looking directly at her. His face was pale, sweat beading across his forehead, but his eyes were sharp now, live, searching. You. His voice cracked behind the oxygen mask. He gestured faintly with his hand, fingers trembling. You're one of us, aren't you? The entire crowd froze. Maya's jaw tightened. She met his gaze steadily. There was no point denying it to him, not to someone who bore the same scars. The same weight once, she said finally. The SEAL gave the faintest smile, his lips curling even as weakness threatened to drag him under again. Knew it, he coughed, his voice breaking. You saved me like you've saved others before. Respect. Her eyes softened for the first time. She gave him a small nod. A silent acknowledgement between warriors. The paramedics urged him back down, telling him to rest, and the ambulance doors closed with a heavy slam. The sirens wailed as it pulled away, carrying him toward survival. The moment it disappeared from sight, the spell broke. The passengers erupted with applause, cheers, shouts of thanks. Some even cried, overwhelmed by the drama they had just witnessed. Phones that had once recorded in morbid fascination now captured gratitude, though not one person dared step. Close enough to interview her, Maya raised a hand once, almost awkwardly, in a small wave of acknowledgement. Then she turned, slinging her bag across her shoulder, but the TSA officer blocked her path gently. Ma'am, Captain, whatever you are, please. The world should know what you did today. You should be honored for this. Her eyes met his, calm but piercing. I didn't do it for honor. I did it because he needed someone. But still no, she cut him off, her tone final. Heroes chase medals, I bury them. The silence that followed was heavy, sobering. She walked past him, past the line of passengers who instinctively stepped aside, giving her a clear path through the checkpoint. For the first time in airport history, security made no demands, no ID checks, no scanners. She walked freely, as though the weight of her actions had already cleared the way. One little girl, no older than 8, tugged at her mother's hand and whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, Mommy. She's like a superhero. Maya glanced back just once. For the first time that day, her lips curved into the faintest smile. Not pride, not arrogance, just quiet humanity. Then she disappeared into the terminal, swallowed by the crowd. But her story didn't disappear with her. By the end of the day, cell phone videos had spread online. Headlines exploded. Mystery woman saves Navy. CAL at JFK Airport. Heroic stranger revives. Soldier in front of hundreds. Unidentified passenger shows combat medic skills. During airport emergency, the footage replayed her steady compressions, her commanding voice shouting clear, and her calm presence under crushing pressure. The internet debated her identity, journalists speculated, and veterans recognized the signs in quiet corners of the military community. Whispers confirmed what the public could only guess. Maya Lewis had been one of theirs, a shadow among shadows. The kind of soldier who never asked for credit, never wanted her name in print, but who carried lives in her hands more times than anyone would ever know. Back in the terminal, life slowly returned to normal. Families went back to their lines. Business travelers hurried to catch their flights. TSA resumed its work. But the checkpoint where it all happened felt different, as if the tiles themselves had absorbed the weight of what had taken place. And for those who were there, one truth became unforgettable. Not all heroes wear uniforms. Some blend into crowds, carrying scars and secrets no one can see until the moment fate calls, and their true nature is revealed. Maya Lewis had vanished into anonymity again. But for everyone who witnessed her actions that day, she was unforgettable. The airport had begun to breathe again. The crowd slowly dispersed. Though their voices carried the same refrain, the woman in gray had saved a Navy SEAL's life, but Maya Lewis wanted none of it. She walked through the terminal like a shadow, her bag slung casually over her shoulder, blending into the endless movement of travelers. To any outsider, she looked like just another passenger rushing to her gate. But those who had seen what she did would never forget. At St. Mary's Medical Center, just a few miles from the airport, The SEAL regained consciousness. The fluorescent lights above buzzed softly and the sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air. His chest ached where the defibrillator pads had shocked his heart. But he was alive. The attending physician checked his vitals and gave a satisfied nod. "You're lucky," he said. "Another minute and you wouldn't be here." "Whoever performed CPR on you?" They knew exactly what they were doing. The SEAL blinked slowly, recalling the moments before he blacked out. The woman's face surfaced in his mind, not beautiful in the conventional sense, but striking. Calm, focused. Her voice still echoed. Clear. He rasped, his throat raw. "Where is she?" The nurse exchanged a glance with the doctor. "She refused to give her name. Just left after you were taken in. Didn't want recognition." The SEAL closed his eyes, but a faint smile tugged at his lips. "Figures," he whispered. "Real warriors never stay for applause." By evening, footage of the incident had reached not just social media but military circles. Within hours, it landed on the desk of Rear Admiral Jonathan Reeves at the Pentagon. He watched the shaky cell phone video on repeat, the calm precision, seamless commands, the refusal to accept failure. He leaned back in his chair, sighing. "Well, I'll be damned." He picked up his secure line and dialed. "Get me Task Force Black Archives," he said. "I want confirmation." "Was Maya Lewis at JFK today?" There was a pause on the other end. Then the quiet answer came. "Yes, sir." It appears she intervened. Reeves exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. "She told us she wanted to disappear. No medals, no attention. Just a quiet life. Seems fate had other plans," the aide replied. Reeves nodded to himself. "She saved one of ours again. Make sure word reaches the SEAL community, but discreetly. No press, no leaks. If she wanted the spotlight, she'd have stayed. She's earned her peace." Meanwhile, the checkpoint where it all happened had taken on an almost sacred hush. TSA officers straightened their posture whenever they passed it. Travelers whispered about the woman like she was a myth made flesh. The officer she had corrected earlier about losing 30 seconds replayed her words in his mind. They weren't an insult. They were instruction. He vowed silently. "Next time I won't freeze. Next time, I'll be ready." Sometimes respect doesn't come from rank. It comes from truth. And hers had cut sharper than any reprimand in the food court. Two businessmen who had witnessed everything retold the story over coffee. "She just dropped to her knees like she'd done it 1,000 times, one said. Didn't even flinch. I swear I thought he was gone." His companion shook his head in awe. "That wasn't just medical training. That was battlefield stuff. You don't learn composure like that in a classroom, at another table." A young woman scrolled through the video again, her voice trembling as she showed her boyfriend. Look at her face. She wasn't scared. She wasn't even human in that moment. She was something else. Children who had seen it clung to their parents. Wide-eyed, whispering about the superhero in gray, Maya boarded her flight without incident. No one asked for her boarding pass again. The gate agent, recognizing her from the commotion, simply scanned it without a word. Her eyes full of unspoken gratitude, Maya slid into her seat by the window, finally allowing her body to relax. She closed her eyes and leaned back. But peace didn't come. Memories rose unbidden, men screaming in the desert, helicopters circling, her hands soaked in blood that wasn't her own. The adrenaline had faded, but the ghosts remained. She whispered under her breath, so soft only she could hear. Stay buried. But fate had other plans. Days later, the Navy SEAL Lieutenant James Carter stood on shaky legs in his hospital room, fur still trailing from his arm. He looked stronger now, his color back, his voice steady. Reporters had tried to swarm him, but he refused every interview. "The woman who saved me deserves her privacy," he told them. "Respect her choice." But privately, he made a vow. "I'll find her, not to expose her, not to drag her back into the spotlight, but to look her in the eye and say thank you. The kind of thank you only a soldier can give." Within weeks, the internet couldn't stop buzzing. Who was the woman? Some claimed she was a doctor, others swore she was CIA, and a few conspiracy theorists said she was an angel in disguise. But in the military community, whispers turned to legend. Old comrades confirmed quietly what the public didn't know. Maya Lewis had once been a ghost in uniform, a medic who saved lives where no one else could. And now, she had surfaced again, not for glory, but because fate had forced her hand. Months passed. Maya returned to her quiet life, slipping back into anonymity. She worked part-time at a clinic, kept her head down, avoided the news. But sometimes, late at night, her phone buzzed with messages she didn't expect. From soldiers she had once patched up. From families she had once comforted. From James Carter himself, who eventually found a way to reach her, not through press, not through intrusion, but through the same network of brothers and sisters who carried invisible scars. His message was simple. You don't know me, but I'll never forget you. You taught everyone at that airport what it means to serve without asking for respect. You earned it. Always. She stared at the message for a long time. Then, for the first time in years, she allowed herself to smile, not faint. Not fleeting, but genuine. Because in the end, she realized the truth. Respect isn't given. It isn't asked for. It's earned. And that day, in front of hundreds of strangers, without a uniform or medal to her name, she had earned it once again. The world may never know her full story. The headlines would fade, the videos would vanish into the endless churn of the internet, and her name would remain hidden. But for those who were there, for the man whose heart she restarted, and for every soul who understood what true service means, Maya Lewis would remain unforgettable. Because sometimes, the greatest warriors don't stand on podiums or in parades. Sometimes they walk quietly among us, ordinary in appearance, extraordinary in action. And when the moment comes, they don't hesitate. They just act.